Welcome, everyone, to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Pitchick and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Pretty good.
Good.
How are you?
Back stateside, back on the podcast. We had fun without you, but I'm glad to have you back, buddy.
Yeah, I heard all about the fun, yes.
The 2 hours of it.
The 2 hours of fun.
Very, very long episode. But let's get into our upkeep stuff so we can get onto our discussion topics for the day. First off, this podcast is brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art has all sorts of tokens, dice bags, playmats, art prints, all sorts of stuff. And right now, I do want to actually highlight they currently have a collaboration with Mark Rosewater, who, for those who are not up on like super minor Magic trivia, has illustrated a single Magic card. He illustrated a card for Unglued. It's called Look at Me, I'm the DCI. He is the lowest paid Magic artist of all time, accepting a single $1 in check form for his work. But he has licensed a playmat. And the cool thing about this playmat is that by licensing it, actually a chunk of the money is going to a charity. And in this case, it is going to a specific school that one of Mark Rosewater's kids has gone to. He's super passionate about it. It focuses on, like, from what I understood, slightly different teaching techniques. So it's definitely beneficial, and you can feel a little good. Also, it's a very silly playmat, and I love the fact that there is a crayon drawing, and it actually rendered out pretty well. But if that, or for example, tokens with classic art from the rest of the world, not Magic specifically, or Magic art, any of that interests you, check out Original Magic Art. They have a affiliate code for us. If you're checking out and you found some neat stuff and you want to use the affiliate code Commontary, spelled as it is the name of this podcast, and in all caps, you'll get 5% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It lets them know that we sent you over there. So one last time, that is Commentary, all caps, as it's spelled in the name of this podcast. What do you got for us, Adrian?
All right, we're also on Patreon. For just $1 an episode, you too can hear the full show, including our pre and post shows, and you get access to our patron exclusive Discord channel. Come on by. Yeah,
it's a good time. I have fun there. All right, so before we get into our discussion topics for the day, you just got back from Japan literally yesterday. How was your trip?
Longest 48 hours of my life. Time zones, not fun. The trip was great. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Magic portion of the trip here real fast, because I did get to play Pauper in 2 different tournaments. First, the GP did terribly. We went 3-5. We did not day 2. I won't get into the specifics, but basically, I think it was my first time ever playing Sneak and Show at a big tournament, and so I didn't win some games that I could have won, and it was fun though. But so on Sunday, I got to play in a Pauper tournament. It was 4 rounds, and Pauper is pretty big, from what I could tell in Japan now as well. They had like a Pauper promotional session on Saturday of the GP, where you could just like watch people play Pauper, and like some kids were doing it, some adults were doing it, and I think they even got to play too. But it was definitely like very relaxed, like sort of demonstration style. And then there was actually a Pauper challenge on Sunday, which is what I played in. I went 3-1. It was a very diverse meta game. I saw Teachings. I actually played against Teachings, where the one's called with Sprout Swarm. I saw Is It Delver? I saw Mono White Heroic. I saw like Pestilence. Like basically every deck you could think of, I saw a version of it during my time over there. I beat some mono red decks. I ripped Cop Red exactly when I needed to. I beat Teachings. I lost to the finals against Elves. They were just able to steamroll me. The play was very nice. It was great. And I got to learn some Japanese Magic habits also. For example, it is customary to show your opponent that you have 15 cards in your sideboard before you start to play.
Huh.
Yeah. So I picked up some like weird Magic Japanese habits. The other is after... So you do it before you play, you do it post sideboard. The other thing is to count off the top 7 cards of your library and like present those. And then the opponent acknowledges that you've drawn 7 cards, and then you can pick up your hand.
Huh, because I personally, this is definitely tangent territory, but I do deal out 7 cards as clearly as possible so that my opponent can see and verify if they want to, but like I don't wait. So that's kind of an interesting little cultural note.
They wait. You say check in order to acknowledge that the opponent has drawn the correct amount of cards, and then they pick up their hand. Like, it is very much like a courteous thing, and I liked it quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it probably cuts down on people, cheating or accidentally cheating even.
Right. And then I got to play at Haruya's Pauper F&M. It was a 3-round tournament. Even though we had more than 8 people, I want to say maybe like we had as high as 12 or 13, maybe 14. And in that one, I played against like Black White. I think it was Pestilence. They were playing a bunch of the runes. The first round, I don't know what I played against. They went turn 1, Great Furnace, or no, Mountain. I was like, okay, Mountain. And then they went turn 2, Great Furnace, Prophetic Prism. But I was playing Affinity, like both of these tournaments, and I had already beat him. So I was like, oh, he's on Boros. So I bring in my anti-Boros stuff, and turn one of the next game, he plays Swiftwater Cliffs. And I was like, not what I was expecting.
So like blue-red control splash, like with artifact lands for Galv Blast, maybe?
I have no idea. I beat him before he played like the Karoo, Is It Boiler Works, and I had him dead the next turn. I had very nut draws against him. In that tournament, I lost to Blue-Red Delver in the finals, Gorilla Shaman. I managed to 4-for-1 my opponent, killing 3 Delvers in the Shaman, and then he still won the game because earlier on he had blown up my lands, and that's why I stopped playing Affinity, because Gorilla Shaman makes the games really unwinnable sometimes.
Yeah, the last time I hit up Pauper event, I grabbed Affinity and like got absolutely steamrolled by Boros one game, just because he had the early Gorilla Shaman and just, there was not any ground to be gained once that happened.
Yeah. But I guess I was a little salty about that one because I 4-for-1 my opponent and had like a stacked hand, and I just didn't draw another land the rest of the game, and so I couldn't do any of my Affinity stuff, and I had like Stringleaf Drums in play. Like, it was a very I didn't like tilt off. Like, my opponent did play really well, but I was like, man, this is really unfortunate that I'm like I can't do anything even after I 4-for-1 my opponent.
Yeah, that is a little frustrating. So it sounds like you had a good time though, and you got to play a bunch of Pauper while you were over there. So that's sweet.
Yeah, it was great. Pauper is a thing in Japan. I'm just glad it's becoming a thing worldwide.
Cool. All right. So now that we've gotten that discussion topic covered, we're in spoiler season again. Like, I think we've gotten to the point where we're just in like a perpetual spoiler season at this point, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. But have you managed to be keeping up with the Dominaria spoilers at all?
I have, and I'm looking over the list just to make sure. There's really one card I like a lot here, and we'll get into it when we get there. But yeah, why don't you start us off on the first card?
Yeah. So first off, I think like just a brief thing. Kicker is back, and it's on this first card. It's Vicious Offering, which is 1 and a black for an instant. It has Kicker, sacrifice a creature, and for those who've never played with it, Kicker is an additional cost you may pay as you cast a spell, and if you kick it, you get an additional effect. So in this case, 1 and a black, instant, Kicker, sacrifice a creature. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. If this spell was kicked, that creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. And this was one of the first commons that we actually saw and knew was common. Do you think there's potential in this?
I just don't know what would play it. I guess there's the green-black sacrifice deck, maybe. But I don't know. It's sort of just, I feel like we have better -2/-2s out there. We have Disfigure, and we have a Moment of Craving, or does that do 2 damage?
Moment of Craving, I think, is still a -2/-2, maybe. I don't remember. There's not a whole lot of indestructible stuff where that really is super relevant, but
right. I think my larger point is like we have better -2/-2s, and then I don't know what deck wants to sacrifice a creature to this spell in order to give something -5/-5.
I think it's more like I could potentially see this in some sort of alchemy list, because it lets you, at least in the mirror, for example, have your what do you call them? Augur of Bolus's trade up, because you can sacrifice them to kick this. I don't like thinking of this as like the -2/-2 mode as much as thinking about like early game. It's just the -2/-2. It's an overcosted Disfigure, fine. But like late game, you do have the advantage of being able to have this be, something that takes down a large majority of threats in this format. It's missing Ulamog's Crusher and Gear Seeker Serpent, and that's about it.
Right.
I don't know. I don't hate this, but it's nice to see Kicker back because that is a very, very solid ability.
It's sweet.
What else? What else do we have here?
So our next one is a card I like. It's 1 and a white. It's Sarah Disciple, flying first strike for a 1/1. Whenever you cast a historic spell, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. And that's a new mechanic, or the label is a new label, I should say. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. For our format, the artifacts are the ones that are going to actually matter. And because of that, I feel like you could play it in Boros, maybe in the sideboard. The biggest downside is that it doesn't help you in the bounce shenanigans like the other 2 flyers in the deck do. First strike is very awesome, but since it's a 1/1, it also is soft to Electrickery, which that deck is already it's insulated against, but it's definitely already very good against Battle Screech. So I would expect people to be bringing in against the Boros deck. So when people are doing that, this card seems a lot worse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. The thing I like about this is the fact that it does have first strike stapled on. So the fact that this does just start eating fairies very quickly.
Yeah, it eats fairies and it survives Sandstorm, which could be relevant since it's a flyer. Although I don't, most of the creatures in Boros are flyers anyway, so I don't know if that actually matters.
It's one of the ones that just strikes me as it could find a role there. The deck does have a slightly crowded 2-drop slot, but I could just see this showing up in some quantity just because it lines up well against one of the best decks in the format. And yes, while it is soft, there is late game this on the board and just going Prism, Skyfisher, bounce the Prism, replay the Prism. Sure, six mana mutagenic growth is not, wonderful, but the fact that you're also, drawing 2 cards, committing an extra body to the board, I just feel like there's just barely enough here for this to be something that we see at some point.
Yeah.
Next up, we've got Saproling Migration, which is another kicker card, 1 and a green for a sorcery with kicker of 4 generic mana. So if you pay 2 mana for this, you get 2 1/1 green Saproling creature tokens, and if it was kicked, you get 4 instead. So either 2 mana for 2 power and 2 toughness, or 6 mana for 4 power and 4 toughness, split over bodies. What do you think of this?
I don't like it. We already have
Sprout Swarm.
Yeah, Sprout Swarm, and we already have Gather the Seeds. I think it's called
Scatter the Seeds.
Yeah. So I don't know if a 6 mana. I don't know what deck wants this. Is basically what it comes down to.
No, that's fair. It's not super impactful. 4 power and toughness over 4 bodies is not huge. So this next one is an interesting one that generated a lot of discussion when it got spoiled.
This next one coming up is Power Stone Shard, 3 mana, and you can tap it for colorless for each artifact you control named Power Stone Shard. So I don't like it.
I don't think it's good either for what it's worth, but that is basically the text on Cloud Post.
Yeah, but Cloud Post is free.
Yes. So this is a 3 mana rock, which, is kind of the spot that they've decided that a lot of mana rocks are going to live at. And if you get all 4 of these online, it does some stupid things. The catch is it's just colorless mana. And on top of that, we don't have ways to clone this. We don't have ways to recur this super efficiently. I don't know if this was 2 mana, would it appeal more to you?
Definitely.
Just the fact that it's a 2 mana rock, I think would be enough.
I think that would be much better.
Because then we're talking Mind Stone and stuff like that, which has occasionally seen play, but at 3 mana, I just can't see this actually doing much of anything. I can see if you get all 4 online, it's sweet. That is 16 mana worth of mana rocks.
I don't think I think the art is really nice. It's going to look good in foil.
Yeah, it's another one of those it's a rock, so have someone hold it kind of arts. But I dig what it's doing, and like I think for what it's worth, like this maybe is a thing in standard. I don't know enough about standard to say one way or the other though. But as it stands, like I can imagine playing this and a lot of times just having one and having a very overcosted waste on your hand. So not for me. Next up we've got Keldon Overseer, which is 2 and a red for a 3/1 with kicker 3 and a red. So it's a 3/1 with haste, and it enters the battlefield. As it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, gain control target creature, untap it. Gain control target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. So it active treasons something. And this also has haste itself. What are your thoughts on this one, Adrian?
People aren't going to play this card. It's just not very good.
I like the fact that it like also has haste, so it steals their biggest thing and also gets in for 3. I don't know.
For 7 mana, no.
For sure, okay, yeah. 7 mana is a big ask, and a 3 mana 3/1 with haste is not amazing, but
yeah,
it is at least interesting. What do we got next?
Guardians of Koilos, 5-drop 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you can return another target historic permanent you control to its owner's hand. So again, 5 mana, just kind of a lot. You know, this effect is nice in Boros, but I don't think they'll want this.
Yeah, I think that's a completely fair read of it. This next one I do think is interesting. Cabal Paladin. It's 3 and a black for a 4/2 human knight. Whenever you cast a historic spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. What do you think about this?
We already have a similar effect on Fireweaver.
Isn't Fireweaver just 1 though?
Yeah, and you don't have to cast it, but Fireweaver also only costs 2. I'm a little worried that this Paladin costs 4.
I mean, it is also a 4/2, which is like a fairly respectable body in our format. I don't know. I think that there's something interesting here. There is the fact that it's on cast, which is like beneficial if they counter it, but it also means you can't get up to any like ghostly flicker shenanigans. So
right.
I don't know. How about you take this last one? And I think this is the one that you were actually excited about.
Yeah, the last one's Divest. I actually do think this card's pretty good. B, target player reveals their hand. You can take an artifact or creature card from it. That player discards that card. So it really is just a better Ostracize.
Yeah, so we had Ostracize, which was black, and it just nabs a creature. Now the question is this good enough? Because the main draw of Duress is it hits 3 different different permanent types in our format, or 3 different card types, I guess.
Well, Divest is very good against Affinity specifically, or against Boros specifically. So I would be interested to see if people start running it for that reason, because in Affinity you can take literally anything in their deck. Because this includes lands, it just says artifacts, and against Boros.
Oh, I didn't see that bit. I just assumed that the non-land text was included on this.
No, it's not. And then against Boros, you can do sort of a similar thing. Like obviously, it's not as good, but you could nab a key permanent, a key 2-drop artifact they were planning to use. You could take a land sometimes, or you could take one of their creatures. So I think it's a strong. Spell.
For what it's worth, I do like this more than like. Because I'm imagining this shows up in mono black and like blue black lists. I do like this more than a null.
Yeah, it's very proactive. So you can just take the best thing.
It's proactive, and a null is like super narrow. Yes, it is a 1 mana answer, but this can hit like a null is enchantment or artifact, and outside of Boggles, there's not many decks that run that many enchantments in them. So I guess Stompy as well, but I kind of really like this. I think like this is a fine sideboard option if you have a tough time dealing with artifacts. So
yeah, and like I said, literally anything in Affinity's deck except for Galvanic Blast and Thoughtcast, I suppose, can get taken with this, or Fling. So there are some cards that can't, but like
how many hands have you kept with like kind of sketchy mana in Affinity?
All of them. Yeah, all of them. It's going to be very strong against that deck.
Like being able to just look at your opponent's hand, and if they have 1 land in it, like turn 1 on the play, like if your opponent just has 1 or 2 lands, like I feel like you just got to snap it off and just be like, all right, let's see if you get lucky.
Yeah,
but
it's gonna be. I think this card is gonna be played.
Yeah. Also, I really dig the art. It's kind of weird and creepy and a little lore-winny.
Yeah.
So before we move on, we do have a deck tech for folks today, but I did want to talk about. So with this set, we've seen historic matters, and as a subsection, legendary matters, which I don't think are going to play huge roles. But kicker, I want to talk about kicker for a second. I think that kicker means we have a decent chance of getting a Tron card. Just because all it takes is one thing that has like a stupid like 5 mana kicker cost and goes from like good to real stupid. And I think there might be something in here for a deck like Tron that can just go over the top in terms of its mana production. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I'm excited to see. I mean, the full set is spoiled, right? But it's hard to. I don't like waiting through.
It's not really like. It's probably about half of it, probably a little more at this point. The initial leak, for those who were not paying attention, this like half the set accidentally got leaked by Wizards, and as a result, we know most of the cards that are going to be in this set. Specifically, like a lot of legendary creatures that needed. It was the basically the rules clarification document that they do every time they release a set, where it's like, hey, here's the basic rules problems you might run into with this card, and here's how it works. But now they actually they basically leaked that document, and then since it was on a Chinese website, they said, all right, look, we know you're going to put these through Google Translate and do a terrible job of it. We're just going to release it in English, and we'll preview the cards as we go. But I think this set looks really good, and if nothing else, like I'm an old Magic player at this point. I have a huge love for Dominaria as a setting.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun times.
Yeah, that and like I do kind of dig the new legendary frame, but that's a whole different thing, which we'll probably cover in the set review.
I think there are actually new cards since you put together this list.
Literally since we started recording this. Oh God, you're right. So, I'm not seeing anything amazing, but yeah, we did just get a big old batch of uncommons.
Well, there is a common unwind.
Oh,
2 and a blue.
No.
Counter target non-creature spell. Untap up to 3 lands. That's pretty neat.
Oh no, Wizards! What are you doing?
As a counterspell, it seems okay. We also have Adventurous Impulse. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library anywhere. That seems pretty sweet.
Yeah, it certainly does. Syncopate's getting a reprint. Fire Elemental's getting a reprint. Okay, Unwind looks pretty legit. What do you think about that? So 3 and a blue, counter non-creature, untap up to 3 lands.
Well,
this is a free counter spell.
It's kind of like Rewind.
It's
right,
like,
but a little bit better because it costs less.
It costs 1 blue mana in particular less. Like I can see this showing up in Tron.
Yeah, I think it'd be good. So the good thing, I guess, since it's a counter spell, most of the time we're doing this on your opponent's turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna be much harder to break. But yeah, it is very interesting. I think it's a good looking card.
Yeah, I don't think you can break this in like a combo sense because you still would need stuff to be on the stack to actually counter this. I don't know. I actually really dig this card, and I'm real glad that you checked because otherwise we would have a whole lot of angry messages underneath this episode, I can imagine. But yeah, okay. Well, that was a hell of a note to end on. But the full spoiler will be dropping, I believe, next Friday, and as a result, next week our episode will be recorded on the weekend, and it will be a set review, and we'll figure out how we want to tackle that, if we want to do every single common or if we're just going to do the relevant ones that we want to talk about. All right, we got a deck tech. It's been a while.
Let's do it.
We got Zuberas Storm,
and I did see this at the GP also.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
Oh man, someone put that together quick, because this is I had not seen this prior, but what's his name? Saffron Olive from MTG Goldfish put together a video series of him playing through a league with this. So for those unaware, the Zuberas are a very, very small tribe from Kamigawa block who all care about other Zuberas dying. So let's get this kicked off. First off, we've got these creatures. So we got 4 copies of Viscera Seer, which lets you sacrifice a creature to scry 1. And this is kind of one of the linchpins of the deck, since all of these Zuberas are just like, they only have death triggers, so you kind of need a free way to pop them. And if you're going to get like a scry 1 out of it, I feel like that works even better. Next up, we have got a copy of Bloodthrone Vampire, which is 1 and a black for a 1/1 that you can sacrifice a creature and give it +2/+2 until end of turn. So are you noticing perhaps a little bit of a trend here, Adrian?
Looks like we'll be sacrificing some stuff.
We sure are. And main deck, we have 4 Zuberas. We have, or 5, excuse me. We have 1 copy of Ember Fist Zubera, which is a 1/2 for 1 and a red, and when it is put into a graveyard from play, it deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of Zuberas put into all graveyards from play this turn. And then the other 4 are all Floating Dream Zubera, which is 1 and a blue, and it has that same big chunk of text, except instead of dealing damage, you're going to draw a card for each Zubera put into a graveyard from play this turn. All right. So this is weird already.
Yeah, it sounds like, Mike, we're going to be sacrificing a bunch of Zuberas, drawing through our deck, maybe scrying a little bit on the way or pumping a creature, and then we're looking for this Ember Fist Zubera, and we're going to try sacrificing it to do damage to our opponents.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about how these work is that if you can sacrifice 2 of them at once, and you haven't sacrificed any so far this turn, both of them will see 2 Zuberas having died this turn. So it gets into some funny situations. Now, when we look at our spells, we have 4 Dark Ritual, 4 Cabal Ritual, and 4 copies of Culling the Weak. Culling the Weak is a black for a instant, sacrifice a creature, add black to your mana pool. So we've got a lot of ways to like just get a dumb amount of mana into our mana pool very, very quickly. And then the rest of the spells in this deck are pretty much all devoted to making sure that you get more than 1 use out of each Zubera. So we've got 4 copies Unearth, 4 copies Exhume, 4 copies Undying Evil, 4 copies of Supernatural Stamina. All right. I think I see what this deck is trying to do here, Adrian. What say you about this plan?
It looks hard. The other thing is I just noticed there's only 2 red sources in the deck, and it's 2 copies of Lotus Petal.
Yes, there are 2 Lotus Petals, and then the lands are made up of 3 Ash Barrens, a Dimir Guildgate, 4 Dismal Backwaters, 2 Evolving Wilds, 2 Islands, and 6 Swamps.
So yeah, it does sound like you're trying to generate a bunch of mana, and then through like Viscera Seer, Bloodthrone Vampire, you sacrifice a bunch of Zuberas, or you have Calling the Weak. You use stuff like Supernatural Stamina, Undying Evil, and Unearth, and Exhume to get the Zuberas back on the field so you can keep doing it, and eventually you try and find Ember Fist Zubera, sacrifice it, and do 20 damage to your opponent.
Yeah, I think there's also probably a line that involves just sacking a bunch of stuff into Bloodthrone Vampire and swinging.
And getting in, yeah. That seems like the worst plan for this deck, though.
Yeah, like obviously you're already kind of a glass cannon combo type of deck, so having to like hope that your opponent, on top of not interrupting this combo, is also not going to have a single creature to back to block is kind of a decently big ask. That said, like I'm kind of shocked that there's not like somewhere in the 75 like a copy of what do you call it? The Black Fling.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Right of Consumption.
Thank you. I could picture in my head. It's all the Flamekin elementals on Shadowmoor. doing a ritual.
That's a sorcery speed fling, which gains you life, by the way, folks at home. So it could be relevant sometimes for that. But yeah, I think that would be, I guess that card is just kind of a do nothing unless that's the way you're actually going to go. And that plan seems bad anyway, since you could just counter it.
I was going to say that plan seems frankly tenuous at best.
Yeah.
All right. So the game plan here is use your Floating Dream Zuberas, draw a bunch of cards, and somehow assemble enough mana and enough loops through a Zubera of some sort to, get to that Ember Fist Zubera, get to a Lotus Petal, because hopefully you still have one left. And man, this is an interesting one. What do you think about this? Like, as a whole, like, do you think this is something that you would ever play?
Maybe. I think it's really sweet in the way that, so like different formats have sort of different defining characteristics. One of the defining characteristics of Pauper for me are the weird bad combo decks. And so in that regard, I like it a lot. Like people are always trying to find alternative ways to win in Pauper, and this is definitely one of the more creative ones. It's up there like Vinestorm. It's like, how did someone ever think this up? Yeah,
and this one's definitely interesting because I've seen like grindy value Zubera decks where it's just like playing a bunch of them, usually across more colors than this deck, and it's just trying to kind of amass like a critical density of value, whereas this deck is definitely trying to just go like, we're going to figure out some way to 20 you in one turn off the back of Ember Fist Zubera.
That being said, my impression of the deck at the GP, my impression of it here is not, like One Land Spy, I think just loses to itself sometimes, even when they combo off. This deck just seems insanely slow. And I would worry that you're just going to get run over by some of the other decks in the format.
So when you played against this, how...
I didn't actually play against it.
You
I
just
watched
saw
it. Yeah.
Did it successfully combo off in any of the games that you saw?
No, it played against my Elves opponent, and he just absolutely destroyed them on like turn 3 or 4 of every game.
All right, that does not deeply surprise me. Like I can't imagine like
it just has like no interaction for matchups like that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. Like, what does it actually honestly take to disrupt this? Like, potentially one counterspell or potentially like one piece of graveyard hate.
It feels like if they lose the Zuberas in the loop, they're done. Or if you counter Ember Fist Zubera and you have a blocker for Bloodthorn Vampire, I don't know how they win.
Yeah, it just seems real rough in that regards. And I'm looking at the sideboard. We could
go over the sideboard. There could be some stuff on the board. Yeah.
So like the sideboard is 3 Duress, 2 Gutshot, 3 copies of Ashen Skin Zubera, which has the standard boilerplate for a Zubera, but it makes your opponent discard cards equal to the number of Zuberas that have died.
Okay.
And then we've got Echoing Truth in 3 copies of that, 2 Nausea, and 2 Pieces of the Puzzle. What on earth is Pieces of the Puzzle in here for, in the sideboard of all places?
I guess you can use it to find... It dumps stuff into your graveyard, and you get to pick an instant or sorcery and put it into your hand, right?
You get 2 instants or sorceries.
I mean, you can use it to bin Zuberas and then maybe get them back with Exhumer on Earth. But in that case, I don't know. I feel like in that case, I'm like Faithless Looting might almost be better.
I don't know. I'm looking at this as, if you cast this on turn 3, you're 10 cards deep in your deck or so if you're on the draw. 9 if you're on the play. Like, that leaves 50 cards, and there's 5 Zuberas in the deck. Like, that's maybe a 1 in each one has a 1 in 10 chance, so like 50% that you hit at least 1. But
I do really like the Ashen Skin Zubera, because that and the Duress sort of answers the problem of what if your opponent plays counterspells. Ashen Skin Zubera, you can just start playing that loop in order to get rid of your opponent's hand before you go for getting the red one. I think that I like that it fits into the deck's game plan.
I'm kind of just shocked that like Ashen Skin Zubera isn't main deck, just because in some quantity because if we're already on the plan of like a single Ember Fist Zubera as one of our combo outs, I feel like having a single copy of, Mind Twist in this deck probably wouldn't hurt so much. It's just kind of funky. One of the super interesting things is the interaction between Supernatural and Stamina and Undying Evil and the Zuberas themselves. Because if you target them with it and then sack them, they'll actually get back to the battlefield before their death trigger resolves if you stack your triggers correctly. So you can actually like Undying Evil a Zubera, sack it, have the Undying trigger resolve first, and then sack it again, so you can, tick up your Zubera count by 2. So, like, there is some interesting avenues of play here. I just, like, what does this deck do if your opponent has, like, 2 or 3 counter spells?
Yeah, and that's the theme of sort of all the wacky combo decks in the format. So I think the games that you go off with this deck, it's probably very satisfying and very fun. And if you give it enough time, I think this deck would win. But even worse than the counter spells, I would just be afraid of getting beat down.
Yeah, like just if your opponent is planning to close out the game before like turn 6 or something, you might have a hard time. And the decks that aren't looking to close out the game by turn 6 are generally ones that play counterspell. So like, right, I don't know.
But I do think it is a fun deck, and I do think it is among the better combo decks.
Yeah, and also this is, it's been a while since we actually talked about current Pauper things, like up-to-date things. I think that decks like this showing up again and being sort of brought to the attention of people is going to kind of increase as we've been seeing, the league results have kind of drifted to, include slightly more casual or like offbeat types of brews. I have not actually managed to take a look at this week's league results, but I'm seeing a lot of stuff that MTG Goldfish is not recognizing as actual deck archetypes.
You know something I just realized looking at the top 8 is I was like, oh yeah, Pauper, we have these janky combo decks. One of the quote unquote janky combo decks is a tier 1 deck, Inside Out combo. And like that's just kind of a weird Pauper jank style deck. Like it's good. I'm not saying it's not good, but like you look at it and you're just like, how does this work? But it's the best one, right? Because it's the one that's tier 1.
It's also the one that plays the most blue.
Yeah, it's the deck that can best abuse Gush, which is why it's so good in my opinion.
It also needs very little to work, right? Like it needs a tribe without summoning sickness inside out, and like there's like 20 or 30 different combinations of cards it could have and win.
But do you know what I mean? Like at its core, it's a goofy Pauper combo deck.
For years it was. Like I've seen versions of this that run, there's some obscure onslaught card that's like whenever a cleric you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, it gets +0/+2 until end of turn, and you play it with nomads on core because you can target something infinitely with its ability because it's free. Like I remember when this deck was not good, and now someone cracked the code of just play every cantrip.
Augur of Bolus got downshifted also. That's
true. Like that does also help, and
we got Ash Baron. So it's I just wanted to point that out because I don't know. It's just fun to think about.
Yeah, and I definitely think that the change within how results are being reported is not wholly negative. I don't want people to get that idea, but it has sort of it was something we asked for years, just not in the way that we asked for it. Because we are kind of seeing like the rest of the decks, like, I'm looking through here, like there's a Dimir, I guess this is Familiar's deck. I don't even know what some of these decks are trying to do from first glance. And I think that's kind of interesting, but also kind of like not always great for indicating to a new player what the format looks like.
Right, which is what we talked about sort of being an issue.
Yeah, I would like to point out that there is actually another Zubera deck that 5-0'd this week.
What's different about it?
Pretty much everything. Instead of running a bunch of rituals, it's still running 3 supernatural stamina and 3 undying evil and 2 unearth. but it's also running removal in the form of Chainer's Edicts and Tragic Slips. It's also running a bunch of other creatures, and it's not running Ember Fist. It's running Carrion Feeder as a sack outlet. It's running Plagued Rusalka as a sack outlet. It's running a main deck 4 Ashen Skin and 4 Floating Dream Zuberas.
So it's more of a value deck.
It's more of a value deck with like a light Aristocrats theme, because it's also got Sultai Emissary in it. It's got Crypt Rats. It's got Muldrifters.
I feel like I like this deck less.
And why is that? Because
it's just now you're just sort of putting Zuberas into this shell that I feel like exists in other decks and is already better, instead of sort of playing to the combo nature. I don't know. It feels like you're getting a little too cute almost.
Okay, I think that's actually pretty fair.
If I vote, so clearly there's some legs to it.
I would like to point out that this person does have the sideboard Sylvok Lifestaff in this, which
I bet that's unbeatable for some decks.
The sideboard Sylvok Lifestaff and a sideboard Reaping the Graves.
Oh man, I'm a little bit back up on this deck now. That's kind of sweet.
Like I think once you remove the super combo aspect of it, you also get to like make room in your board for like counter spells. You can actually interact on the stack, and you're not just like, oh, well, they had the removal, or oh, well, they had the counter spell. I think this is less all in, but it also just plays like a Muldrifter will get there if they don't stop it. So I kind of appreciate that. And also the fact that like Carrion Feeder versus Viscera Seer, I think is a really interesting difference, because this deck is less planning to win in one turn and more planning to like leverage the fact that it already wants to kill its own creatures. And instead of having those creatures need to be the win con, it's just, all right, if anything's dying, I can just sack it to Carrion Feeder and just have this big dumb beater.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's an interesting take on it. But yeah, I don't want to sit here and be the grumpy old man that says like league results are bad now, but like they're definitely showing different data than they were even earlier this year.
Yeah, you said it wasn't bad already, so so it's not bad.
All right. So yeah, that is Zuberas. I do want to talk very quickly here about the price of this dang thing. This is not a cheap deck, and it is deeply, deeply niche. This deck is $48 on MitGo. It is $56 in paper. Most of that entire cost is the fact that Ash Barrens is still kind of pricey, and the fact that Lotus Petal is apparently $12 a pop.
Yeah, Lotus Petal is weird because it's definitely one of the most expensive cards, one of the more expensive cards in the format. Once you have it, you can play all the janky combo decks though. So if you like this style of deck, or the weird combo brews, picking them up might be a solid investment. But if you want to stay away from those, then they're not worth it at all, because I think those are the only style of decks they really get played in.
I do have to admit, I think I picked up Lotus Petals when they were like a couple of bucks, and I do have a play set of them, but like, would you recommend this to someone who does not have Lotus Petals and Ash Barrens?
I could say you could probably do it without Ash Barrens, but I would say if you don't have the Lotus, you might even be able to do it without Lotus Petals, but the fast mana just seems really good. You could probably do it without both, honestly. Like if someone really wanted to and they didn't have the money and they didn't want to spend the money, you could probably just do it. Like you could play Simian Spirit Guide instead of Lotus Petal.
Oh yeah, that did just get a reprint, so that's got to be slightly cheaper than it was. And
yeah, I wonder if that's not just better, in fact, now that I'm thinking about it, because it's uncounterable also, like exiling for the mana.
That is true.
You could in theory counter one of the Lotus Petals if you really wanted to.
Like I think the other thing though is like Lotus Petal, while it does count as the red source, could, like, you do have 2 in the deck, you could pop one of them for blue or black. So
that's true. That's true. So yeah, I would say there are definitely ways around if you don't want to play those. Play a different fetch land or play Simian Spirit Guide.
All right, yeah, those are both fair suggestions. And actually, let me just double check on Simian and see where that guy is sitting in terms of price. Because it used to be like a $13 common. Okay, it's like $3. It's half the price.
he's very cheap right now.
All right, well that is a cool suggestion for how to kind of bring the price down on this one a little bit. All right, so that kind of wraps up Zuberas Storm. Anything else you want to discuss today, Adrian, that you've been noticing about the Pauper metagame? Any neat things, or are we just kind of laying low till Dominaria actually hits?
I wish there was more I could talk about on the Japan trip. I like I mentioned earlier, I thought it was very cool that I saw all these different decks represented. Basically, I saw everything. Like, name a deck, I saw it. I wish I'd gotten to play against a little more. I played against a lot of mono red, like I mentioned. But
no, when you say mono red, are you talking like red deck wins, or are you talking like burn? Or
I played against burn, and then I played against mono red heroic.
Ooh, wow!
And
that's a
all the
blast
sideboard
from the
games,
past.
all the sideboard games, I drew my Circle of Protection red. If I could redo it, I would not have taken Affinity. I would have taken Boros. I'm actually very excited to play Boros again here locally. I hadn't really ran it in a long time, but I really want to again. I think I think that because of Palace Sentinels, it's one of the best decks in the format currently, as you know. And so since I have a lot of experience with it, I'm excited to go back to it. Going back to Affinity made me remember why I don't like playing Affinity, mostly because of Gorilla Shaman.
Mostly because Wizards made a mistake years ago and printed an absurd sideboard card.
But even without Gorilla Shaman, I did lose a game where I just like kind of goozled myself on mana. Yeah. So there's also that element to it. The deck is definitely strong when you're doing the thing it wants to do, but it feels so weak otherwise that I would rather play a deck that's a little bit more consistent. And it's probably honestly why Affinity isn't really putting up the numbers that it used to.
I mean, there's also the matter of like with metagame reporting changing, like it's very unlikely that like two different Affinity lists get reported in a week period with the 15 card difference rule.
That's true. All the decks are very similar.
Like there's two black decks that got reported because one of them is running a tiny creature suite and then running a bunch of land destruction main deck, and then the other one is just kind of playing a traditional mono black controlled plan.
I do actually have kind of this sweet story that's not mine. I went with a bunch of my friends, and we all played Pop Red Haruya, and my friend Kevin was in a mono black mirror, and he's a gorgeous mono black deck. Like, it's fully foil. And the ones that it's not, it's like the nicer version of the card, like Black Border Kumbah Witches. I think he even has the like miscolored oubliettes, like just a very, very, very nice deck. And he was in the mirror and he won because they over there, both the mono black decks that were by the Japanese players had like Wrench Mine and like other like really grindy cards for other matchups, but he was the only deck with Monarch. And so he managed to be the Monarch, and that won him like a bunch of games that I think he should have lost otherwise, or one game I think he should have lost otherwise.
Yeah, I was gonna say having a Thorn of the Black Rose when your opponent doesn't, and like those games are gonna like stall out.
Yeah, in the mono black mirror specifically, yeah, because it seemed to come down to whoever, like they both have their creatures and their removal, and then at the end when the dust settles, whoever's hand is empty, like both hands are empty, whoever has the creature is gonna win the game.
Yeah, and when your hand doesn't really empty at the same rate as the other players, like that's pretty significant.
And also, just you just win games because you have the last Chittering Rats on the board. it's so goofy.
Oh, who has the last Chittering Rats? What a time to be alive.
Yeah, it was very, very grindy matches, but he played very well. And like I said, since he was the Monarch, he drew like 10 extra cards and 7 of them were lands. And it's like, man, if you hadn't had the Monarch, I think you would have just lost.
Yeah, because you would have just been bricking. Like that's why that mechanic is good. Like even if you hit lands, it's on a bonus draw, so you don't really care. You just kind of go for it. So
yeah, Monarch busted mechanic. You heard it here.
You heard it here and pretty much everywhere else, but we're gonna yell it a little bit more. I am actually just this evening going to be heading out and playing some Pauper of my own. I don't know what I'm going to run, but I will also be at GP Hartford next week. Crap. All right, we're gonna have to figure out how we're doing the podcast next week, but I will be at GP Hartford next week. I will be hanging out with noted Pauper person Alex Ullman. We will be playing in a bunch of Pauper events. I will also be playing EDH. I will also be playing Cube. I will be there having a good time. Yeah. So if
I
you're
really
out there,
wish
say
I could.
hi.
I really wish I could go. I really do. But so soon after my trip, I can't.
Yeah, just can't. Your body can't withstand all this fun.
Well, no, I can't take off the time from work.
No,
That's the real problem.
I fully know and understand why, but yeah, I think that brings us pretty close to an hour here, or pretty close to the end of our episode. Do you have anything else before we head out for the day?
Ask Mike for his autograph because it'll make him very uncomfortable.
Yeah. If you happen to recognize me out in the public space, please just don't make it weird.
Oh, dude, I was very vain, and I took my color commentary playmat to Japan, hoping someone would recognize me. And then our show's in English, and most of them aren't going to be listening to an English podcast. So I was like, wow, I was so vain. Hubris.
No, I'm just going to be there and real quiet and
well, people might actually know you at your GP is also what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. If you do see me, come say hi if you want to. Like, I promise I'm a pretty friendly human being, and, you know, I can say hey to you, and, you know, whatever other social interaction you would like to garner from this interaction. But, you know, say hey. I'm gonna be there all weekend. All right. Cool. You want to take us out of the show?
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today. This podcast is brought to you by the support of our Patreons. Please consider supporting us if you like the show. I need to reach into my hat here to give our Patreon shout out. This day, let's go with someone I've never picked before, Big Ol' Kitties. That's a hilarious name. I love cats. Thank you for your support. And for everyone else who supports our show, you can check below this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you, if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to Pat's Games and L and Mike's LGS JP Comics. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.